Hi, welcome to the channel. Today's video is titled The Entire History of the British Empire, right? This is quite interesting. I love history, and I think we recently checked a video about British Empire, right? Hold on, I think the title was how the British Empire ruled the world, and that still lives fresh in my memory. But yeah, I love this. I love every bit and pieces of history because it's just an eye opener, and sometimes it is mind blowing, right? So we're going to check this together, and I would love your thoughts and your contribution in the comments below. Let's dive right in.
If you were to look at Britain on a map today, you'd be forgiven for thinking that its borders
Is
only
that
encompass.
right? Hold on.
If you were to look at Britain on a map today, you'd be
Okay.
forgiven for thinking that its borders only encompass those of the British Isles. But if you look at the world as a whole, you will find that there are actually 14 overseas territories where the British government
14.
still holds power.
That is hold on. This is Anguilla, Bermuda, Antarctic Territory, British Indian Ocean Territory, British Virgin Island, Kai is it Cayenne? Oh god. I'm sorry, I'm even wearing glasses. I can't even see. They're so tiny. This is Cayenne. Is that Cayenne? Wait, what? Why can't I say it? Iron Island. Caribbean Island. What? I'm wearing glasses and I can't see. That's not nice. Falkland Islands. This is Glow Gib. I want to be sure I'm getting the right pronunciation of what I'm saying. I can't say that. Montserrat, Pitcairn, Henderson. From all of this, I think I could recognize Tux and Tux and Kekos. Is it Kekos or Tux and Kekos? I'm sorry, I don't know the pronunciation. I'm not getting it right. Don't call for me. But yeah, still, it's just beautiful because look at this. I think somebody also made a comment in the previous video that Britain is the only nation, or Britain is the only nation that has great in it, and I see why. Because I've asked this question like, how is such a tiny island, tiny, is a tiny, very tiny on the map? It's tiny, but it's got this power rule the world. Like if you're looking for the definition of small but mighty, Great Britain. That's just the definition of small but mighty. Because tell me why, if they own the landmass, Canada, the United States, Russia, even Australia, if they own the landmass these countries, these nations do have, my dear, my dear, but still, they're small, but they hold so much power. And has the power been lost? No, it hasn't, because they still rule the world. Let's be honest. But yeah,
From Gibraltar, at the entrance of the Mediterranean, to the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic, these are the last remaining possessions of Britain's once mighty empire. At the height of its territorial control, a little over 100 years ago, the British Empire covered 1/4 of the globe's landmass and ruled almost a third of the world's population.
a third.
It was the empire on which the sun never set. But how did such a small island nation become the
Small
largest
indeed.
and most powerful empire the world has ever seen?
Hmm.
This is the history of the British Empire.
British Empire.
The foundations of the British Empire were laid long before the state of Britain even formally existed. The dominant power in the British Isles throughout much of its history has been the Kingdom of England. With a well-developed economy and military force to match, England, during the medieval and early modern periods, came to rule over the smaller, independent kingdoms in Wales and parts of Ireland. Although, to the north, the Kingdom of Scotland remained a fiercely proud and independent nation who had bitterly and successfully resisted frequent invasions from its powerful southern neighbour. By the early 17th century, Elizabeth I of England had issued several trading and exploration commissions to English adventurers, with the intention of exploring and colonising new territories yet to be claimed by other European powers. The likes of Sir Francis Drake and Sir Martin Frobisher claimed many lands in the name of England, but these were not followed up with settlements. The first English colony, established in North America at Roanoke Island in 1585, failed dramatically, with the colonists mysteriously disappearing, never to be seen or heard from again. Elizabeth also granted several royal charters to joint stock companies, who were established specifically for the purpose of developing overseas trade. Companies such as the Levant Company, founded in 1592.
Hold on, let me just say this. Does the Levant Company still exist? I mean, there are some parts of history that needs to be protected or should be protected, kept alive even, because sometimes it's just history, right? Learn, expand your mind, open-minded. I want to know.
The East India Company, founded in
does this still
1600,
exist?
were granted monopolies on all English trade to and from these areas. When Elizabeth I died in 1603, the throne of England passed to James VI of Scotland. Upon his ascension to the throne, James became the king of both Scotland and England through the union of the crowns.
Okay, now see what's interesting about history. I recently checked a video about the history of England, like a couple of hours ago, or minutes ago even, and this we just learned about this. But I love history because everything is intertwined, and no knowledge is a waste, regardless. Yeah. And sometimes you might just be like, well, it's I don't want to know this. It's not in my best interest to know this. But sometimes I know not everybody is as curious as I am, but sometimes it's just good to learn, so you know what birthed or what brought about this. And really, I also checked the video, the history of the entire London. Oh my god, like that is mind blowing. But this, you see this, everything is just beautiful to learn. I love it. I love what I'm learning so far.
However, the two kingdoms remained distinct and were ruled separately. As king, James looked to build further on the attempts of his predecessor to establish overseas colonies that were to be ruled and governed under one of the three types of colony structures. A crown colony was directly ruled by the monarch themselves, but would typically be administered by a royally appointed governor and supported by a local council. A charter colony was similar to a crown colony, but was ruled under a corporate charter rather than a governor. These charter colonies often granted colonists significantly more political liberty compared to other colonies. A proprietary colony was governed by an individual who was typically the head of a joint stock company. These colonies were distinct from crown colonies in that they were commercial enterprises with responsibilities to shareholders. Proprietary governors typically did not live in the colony, and so appointed local governors and councils to rule in their absence. Over time, however, these proprietary colonies became increasingly difficult to manage and transitioned to crown colonies instead. An important yet often overlooked development in England's overseas expansion is that of the plantation of Ulster, which saw Protestant settlers from Scotland and England transported to parts of the north of Ireland during the early years of King James's reign. This model of organised colonisation would form the blueprint for future English colonial expansion, with many of the leaders of the Ulster plantation later becoming involved in establishing other colonies in the New World. Throughout the 1600s, the Kingdom of England expanded its overseas colonies in North America and the Caribbean. Some were entirely new ventures, whereas others were annexed from rival foreign powers, like New York, which was seized from the Dutch in 1665.
Yes, in another video I checked this. Yes, this was in a video, the history of New York, how the name York came to like came to existence. New Amsterdam falls to the English. Yes, I checked a video recently. I talked about. You see this? You see why I said history is good. Sometimes, like, just learn. You see, like, everything is intertwined. They are all linked together. They are all linked. Like, before now, if I hadn't checked a video or checked the video of the history of New York, I wouldn't have known. I actually wasn't curious enough to know that, but still, it's good information still. But this, same with the history of London, history of England, and yeah, there's also another one that I want to check. I'm so curious to check it out. The English Civil War. Oh my goodness, my brain is just anticipating. Am I ready mentally? I think I am because I saw a couple of videos. One is 3 hours long, one is 1 hour long. I think there was also another that like kind of compiled everything together. But me, I love the expanded one, the 3 hours one, and also the 1 hours long one, right? Because it will be packed with so much information that, listen, it will still make me like it's more like eating food to your full, right? So I love it. I'm anticipating to check it, which we're gonna do it together. Don't think I'm gonna do it all alone. We're going to do it together, maybe split it into parts or split it into series because yeah. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And also, do you know about what do you know about the English Civil War? I want to learn from you as well so that I have an idea of what we're getting into. I already have a bit of an idea of what we're getting into, but still, I want to learn from you. I want to know from you so that when I'm checking the video, I'll just be asking. I'll just say, "Oh, somebody said this and what." So it will be exciting, be like we're communicating, like an interaction video sesh, if that makes sense. But yeah,
England also significantly developed its trading networks in Africa and the East Indies, with the building of factories and fortified trading posts. A critical
1639.
component to this mercantile success was the creation of the Royal African Company in 1660, who, over the subsequent decades, would become the
Transatlantic slave
leading
trade.
participant in the brutal yet highly lucrative transatlantic slave trade.
Hmm.
During this period, Scotland also began to establish overseas colonies of its own, having looked on somewhat enviously at the successful endeavours of the English. Unfortunately, almost all these attempts ended in failure, with colonies in Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, and Carolina barely lasting a few years. The most abject failure of Scotland's colonisation attempts, however, came in 1698, with the Darien Scheme. This aimed to establish a colony controlling the overland trade route of the Isthmus of Panama between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. To finance the expedition, an immense amount of capital was raised from the public, which accounted for almost a fifth of the wealth in Scotland at that time. When the ships arrived at the coast of Darien, they named the colony Caledonia and set about constructing a settlement called New Edinburgh.
Sonia.
The attempts of the colonists, however, were to ultimately prove futile, as the settlement quickly succumbed to food shortages, tropical disease, and attacks from nearby Spanish forces. Despite a
So it
resupply
doesn't
in
exist anymore?
1699, the settlement was abandoned, and the
No way! No way! What? That would have been beautiful.
survivors, who totaled
Back a bit.
the settlement was abandoned, and the survivors, who totaled just a few hundred of the original
They
2,500,
went back.
returned to Scotland in disgrace. Due to the total disaster of the Darien
No, but I don't think that is a disgrace. I just think that maybe they weren't well informed enough or they weren't well prepared enough as they thought they were. I mean, with things or formation of all of these things with countries, nations, and coming together and all that is like a trial and error. Some tried and some failed. Some tried and they got it right the first time. No, I don't think that was a disgrace. What do you think? I don't think that was a disgrace. I just think everybody had their fair share of trial, of trying to own something, of trying to be great, right? I just think that why do I always want to see the good in people or in nations? Why do I always want to see the good in that? Oh, Cindy.
tropical disease, and attacks from nearby Spanish forces. Despite a resupply in 1699, the settlement was abandoned, and the survivors, who totalled just a few hundred of the original
They
2,500, returned to Scotland in disgrace.
Not
Due to the total
disgrace.
disaster of the Darien scheme and the loss of public money that had been invested into it, Scotland was plunged into a financial crisis. Many then considered that their best and only chance of being part of a major power would be to
What's
share in the benefits of England's colonial enterprise. By the turn of the 18th century, England and Scotland remained independent kingdoms, although the Glorious Revolution of 1688 had dramatically shifted the political landscape within the British Isles. The Catholic James II was deposed and replaced with his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William, who became King William III of England and Scotland.
Queen of England of Scotland. Why is that? Is that a mistake or something? But this is King of England and Scotland. Is this a mistake either on the side, Queen of England of Scotland? Or that's just the name? Let me know what you think. I'm learning. I think I also want to check the history of Scotland. I also would want to check that because there would be quite interesting information on there as well. But no, that wasn't a disgrace. I don't think that was a disgrace. I just think that people try and fail sometimes, and nations also do. So what do you think?
Legislation was passed in England so that only Protestants could inherit the throne, but this law did not apply in Scotland, and so, under the reign of Queen Anne in the early 1700s, efforts were made to unite
Wait,
the
so now is Queen Anne? So what's
was passed
okay? Now I've got questions. Now this is giving me lots more questions. So if Queen Anne was Queen of England and Scotland, why was Mary the Second Queen of England of Scotland? Is that right? What do you think? Or do you think? What do you think? I'm just asking. I'm curious. Queen of England of Scotland. So she is the Queen of England of. It's not making sense to me. Yeah, sometimes it might not even make sense, but I mean, what's up with that?
of 1688 had dramatically shifted the political landscape within the British Isles. The Catholic James II was deposed and replaced with his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William, who became
I think that was a mistake. Queen of England and Scotland. I think that was a mistake. It was a typo error. I think that's I think that was it, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was a mistake. This is the thing that is cracking my brain. And I don't have the mental capacity to crack my brain like this. I just think this was a mistake. I just think it was a typo error.
King William III of England and Scotland. Legislation was passed in England so that only Protestants
Go
could
back
inherit
again.
the throne.
Go back again so I understand and digest.
James II was deposed and replaced with his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William, who became King William III of England and Scotland. Legislation was passed in England so that only Protestants could inherit the throne.
Oh, now it's making sense. I guess maybe because her dad was king of England, Scotland, and England, right? The two. So she was either crowned the Queen of England and of Scotland, right? Or that makes sense because right? Queen of England. Okay, she is the Queen of England, but also of. It still did not make sense to me. I still want to believe that was a typo. I want to believe that. But somebody can also clarify that. Somebody with more expanded knowledge that knows more about this might also because yeah, sometimes like the way they name this thing, sometimes it'd be like, hmm, that makes sense. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, right. She's the Queen of England of Scotland. Oh, England of Scotland. The Queen of England.
But this law did not apply in Scotland, and so, under the reign of Queen Anne in the early 1700s, efforts were made to
Sorry,
unite
I'm
the
gonna take
parliaments
it
of.
back a bit because I just want to like fully digest this part, right? I'm sorry I keep pausing here, but yeah, let me just fully digest it because if I don't understand it,
Crisis. Many then considered that their best and only chance of being part of a major power would be to share in the benefits of England's colonial enterprise. By the turn of the 18th century, England and Scotland remained independent kingdoms, although the
okay,
Glorious Revolution of 1688 had dramatically shifted the political landscape within the British Isles. The Catholic James II was deposed and replaced with his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William, who became King William III of England and Scotland. Legislation was passed in England so that only Protestants could inherit the throne, but this law did not apply in Scotland, and so, under the reign of Queen Anne in the early 1700s, efforts were made to unite the parliaments of both nations and secure a Protestant line of succession for the monarchy. When the Acts of Union were passed in 1707, England and Scotland were then united into one kingdom under the name of Great Britain.
bam! Here it is. Here it is. Bam! Queen Anne was under a reign. But I think I'm slowly getting to understand the Queen of England or Scotland, right? I'm sorry. I'm still not fully like on that. Maybe somebody might explain it better for me that I might fully digest it. But still, but I kind of now understand that maybe because our husband is the king of England and Scotland, she's the Queen of England of Scotland. Queen of England. She's the Queen of England. But I don't know, like my brain is not fully registering it. Why is my brain not fully registering it? Maybe when somebody explains it better, maybe I will. But I just yeah. Okay. Let's just move past that and pretend like that didn't exist because I believe somebody would know better and would explain this for me. I believe it. Please explain it better for me to fully understand this because my brain is, even when I try to tell my brain or convince myself that I fully understand it, I still think I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't know it all. Somebody who might know it would. I still can't. Is the Queen of England, but from right? Is that it? No. Let me not stress my brain with that. Let's move on.
Passed in England so that only Protestants could inherit the throne, but this law did not apply in Scotland, and so, under the reign of Queen Anne in the early 1700s, efforts were made to unite the parliaments of both nations and secure
Yes.
a Protestant line of succession for the monarchy. When the Acts of Union were passed in 1707, England and Scotland were then united into one kingdom under the name of Great Britain.
Well
Over
done,
the
Queen
following
Anne.
decades, Britain became
Yeah.
involved in several wars with other European powers, which were fought not only on the continent, but also wherever their overseas colonial interests lay. After the War of the Spanish Succession concluded in 1714 with a victory for Britain and her allies, peace negotiations granted territorial concessions from the defeated French and Spanish, with Newfoundland and Acadia in North America passing into British control, as well.
This Newfoundland land was also part of the history of Canada when I checked the video, right? You see? Again, history. History is good because everything is kind of intertwined, linked together. But you see how England and Scotland coming together, forming a great nation, forming a bigger nation, Great Britain. Now, the two of them together with their power, knowledge, or whatever, is conquering, doing things together. It's beautiful, right? This is why I just think that sometimes as individuals, regardless, we can't do anything alone. We need the help of others. See, obviously, I know that there was somebody that would explain this information better for me as well, because I don't know it all. And somebody might who might have the knowledge of it would come help me, and I would fully digest the questions. It's just how beautiful, you see how beautiful that is, because sometimes us as individual we try to want to be independent, but we can't do it all alone, right? Regardless, you see how, let's say, Scotland tried to um own a territory or something, but they couldn't. But with them coming together with coming together with England, forming Great Britain, they're going to achieve a lot, which they did. Didn't they? They did, right? Because the achievement is not going to just one party alone, it's going to the entire nation as Great Britain. You see how that makes sense, right? It does. It does. It does. Right?
Well as the strategic Mediterranean islands of Gibraltar,
Back a bit.
granted territorial concessions from the defeated French and Spanish, with Newfoundland and Acadia in North America passing into British control, as well as the strategic Mediterranean islands of Gibraltar and Minorca. Meanwhile, the British East India Company, which was not technically part of the empire, but nevertheless still pursued its colonial interests, was engaged in military operations against its French counterpart across the subcontinent. The aftermath of the Battle of Plassey in 1757 wrestled control of Bengal away from the local Nawab ruler and his French allies, leaving the British to become the leading military and political power in the region. This acted as a springboard for the British East India Company to expand its territory further in later years, either assuming direct rule themselves or via local rulers who were threatened with force from the company's private armies. Further conflicts of the 18th century, namely the War of the Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War in particular, gifted Britain even further territorial concessions at the expense of her rivals. In North America, the British captured Quebec in 1759.
You know what? One thing is the way, like, sometimes when I hear 7 years war, 100 years war, 50 years war, you might just think like casually, but imagine like for 7 years, 7 years, you know, no peace. You're running helter skelter. You don't know if you're going to survive tomorrow or how this war is going to end. 7 years fighting for survival. 7 years. Seven non-stop. Just like you're not catching a break. You can't even sleep. Wow.
And effectively ended French colonial efforts on the continent with the annexation of New France by
New France
1760.
Canada.
Florida passed into British control from Spain, leaving virtually the entire eastern seaboard of North America in British hands. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the 7 Years' War in 1763, also ceded the Caribbean islands of Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, as well as Tobago, to Britain, which was now the most dominant colonial and maritime power of the age.
Wow.
Throughout its history, the British Empire would be powered by two components that went hand in hand with one another. Firstly, mastery of the high seas through naval supremacy, and secondly, indomitable mercantile trade that was free from foreign aggression.
Wait, go back. Wait, what did you say?
And maritime power of the age. Throughout its history, the British Empire would be powered by two components that went hand in hand with one another. Firstly, mastery of the high seas through naval supremacy, and secondly, indomitable mercantile trade that was free from foreign aggression.
Wow. You see, community, how great this is, because Imagine if England were to do it all alone and Scotland were to do it all alone. Do you think they would have the power, the resources? Let's say they both were strong enough like to carry or to do it all alone, but they are small. They are small. They wouldn't have. Let's just be honest, they wouldn't have. You might know well enough, but you still need the help of others to push you forward, right? You need assistance. And it's a good thing they both came together. I mean, what do you know? What do I know? Let's interact. Let's help each other out. Let's see how we can be great together. Right? Right. That's how people come together to form communities. And I love this because Great Britain today, the British Empire, come on. Not just one country and one nation is taking it all. Both are in unity, united kingdom for a sake, for a name, kingdom.
This exponential increase in trade gained immense wealth for Britain through the taxation of goods that passed through its ports. However, the issue of taxation itself would soon lead to revolution and the first major colonial loss for the empire. Although Britain considered its colonies to be sovereign territory, it did not afford them the same rights and privileges which were enjoyed on the British mainland. Throughout the 1760s and 1770s, relations between Britain and its 13 colonies in America became increasingly strained due to Parliament taxing the colonies without their consent or representation. Many within the 13 colonies considered this a breach of their rights as Englishmen and formally renounced the authority of Parliament in 1775, resulting in the outbreak of revolution. Britain sent troops to quell the rebelling colonists, but in the following year of 1776, the leading political figures of the colonies assembled to form the Second Continental Congress and declared their independence from Britain.
Independence.
After a protracted war of 8 years, Britain's military forces in the colonies were finally defeated and the United States of America was recognized as an independent nation. The loss of America marked a sea change for the British Empire. After this, British colonial efforts shifted towards Asia, the Pacific, and Africa, where explorers had charted many new lands yet to be colonized by Europeans. One such explorer was Captain James Cook, who mapped and claimed much of the Pacific Ocean, including New Zealand and the eastern coast of Australia, in the name of Britain. Although Cook was killed on the island of Hawaii during his third voyage, the discoveries he made during the 1770s would be instrumental to the further expansion of the empire. Australia was to serve as a penal settlement for British convicts, who would otherwise have been transported to the 13 colonies before they were lost. The first shipment of convicts arrived in the colony of New South Wales in 1788, and this practice of sentencing criminals to transportation continued into the middle of the 19th century. Britain also expanded its colonial interests into the North Pacific. Explorers such as George Vancouver and Alexander Mackenzie surveyed the western coast of North America in the 1790s, which subsequently opened up the territory to British mercantile interests, particularly that of the fur trade. Inroads were also made into the vast interior of the Rocky Mountains, which expanded British North America westwards. War with France in 1803 would once again challenge Britain's position as the dominant colonial power of the age, with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte in the aftermath of the French Revolution. To protect itself and its colonies from invasion, Britain invested large sums of capital and resources into the war effort, with the Royal Navy blockading French ports and attacking French overseas possessions. A crucial victory was won at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 against the combined Franco-Spanish Navy, albeit at the loss of Britain's Admiral Lord Nelson, who was killed in action. Victory at Trafalgar not only eliminated the threat of invasion for Britain, but it also secured the uncontested supremacy of the Royal Navy for the next 140 years. By the time the Napoleonic Wars had drawn to a close in 1815, the victorious Allied coalition, of which Britain was a part of, secured further territory from the defeated French, Spanish.
See the tiniest, just look at it. Look at it on the map. Just look at it on the map. Small but mighty. They just like I just thought of this. It just reminded me of David and Goliath. David in the Bible and Goliath. But yeah, let's go.
140 years. By the time the Napoleonic Wars had drawn to a close in 1815, the victorious Allied coalition, of which Britain was a part of, secured further territory from the defeated French, Spanish, and Dutch, who had been part of Napoleon's French Empire. The Ionian Islands, Malta, Mauritius, St. Lucia, the Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Ceylon, and the Cape Colony were added to Britain's already substantial number of colonies. Many of these Caribbean colonies contained countless plantations dedicated to the production of sugarcane, which, over the centuries, had become exclusively reliant on slave labour. Although Britain had already profited tremendously from the transatlantic slave trade, the advent of the Industrial Revolution shifted the focus of merchants and capitalists to produce goods at home in Britain, rather than relying on slave-produced goods from the colonies. Additionally, growing political pressure from abolitionist groups eventually forced the hand of the British government to abolish the slave trade within the empire in 1807. It would be another 27 years, however, before the institution of slavery itself would be formally abolished in 1834. The period from 1815 to 1914 has often been described as Britain's imperial century. After effectively seizing control over the Indian subcontinent, the British East India Company looked to expand its interests further across Asia. Singapore was founded as a trading post in 1819 and later incorporated as a colony in 1824. Whereas in China, the East India Company, alongside the British government, were able to seize control of Hong Kong and Shanghai in the aftermath of the First Opium War in 1842. The East India Company's control over India itself, however, was challenged in 1857, when local troops rebelled against their British commanders. In what became known as the Sepoy Rebellion, the East India Company fought against troops previously under its command and retook the territories that had been seized by the mutineers. After the hostilities ended the following year, the British government decided to dissolve the East India Company, believing that it could no longer rule and administer the country effectively. India was then brought under direct British rule in 1858 and became
1858.
the most valuable possession within the empire, colloquially named as the jewel in the crown. An emerging threat to Britain's imperial ambitions during the 19th century came from the Russian Empire, which wished to expand its territorial possessions and sphere of influence into Central Asia and the Mediterranean, to fill the void of the collapsing Ottoman Empire.
You know what? So sorry, I had to pause it here, but something just came to mind. You know why I just like respect Great Britain and the British Empire regardless is, with all of this, they could have owned some of these lands. In fact, majority of these lands, because regardless, let's say for example, look at the map, the entire map, right? Let's say they were settlers or people who already owned some particular land. If they wanted, do you think they wouldn't have owned or expanded, or let's say expanded to other regions that would give them enough landmass if they wanted to? Do you think they wouldn't have? They would have, because they practically ruled the world. Even as small and tiny as they were, they still ruled the world. If they wanted to own They didn't. They will still go to other places, do whatever they want to do, come back home. But yeah, with everything, I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with my mic. My mic has been acting up lately, and I think it's about time I get a new one. Right? It's about time I get a new one because this is so annoying. But still, if they wanted to own more landmass than they owned today, don't you think they would have? They would have.
When Russia invaded the Ottoman-controlled Balkans in 1853, Britain, alongside France, entered the war in support of the Turks, fearing that Russia could threaten their colonial interests in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The resulting Crimean War of 1854 to 1856 was a resounding defeat for Russia and a confidence boost for the British, who remained the dominant global
1854.
imperial power. Although the situation between Britain and Russia in Central Asia remained uncertain, a partial settlement to the issue, known as the Great Game, was reached in 1878, which established
what?
respective spheres
The great what?
who remained the dominant global imperial power. Although the situation between Britain and Russia in Central Asia remained uncertain, a partial settlement to the issue, known as the Great Game, was reached in 1878, which established
Great
respective
Game.
spheres of influence. The British also gained control of Cyprus from the Ottomans that year, as a surety it would be used to defend against any further Russian expansion.
Is great gain, right? Not great game, right? Great gain. Gain as in gain, not game, right? Somebody, please let me know what that is. Great gain. Power ownership or something?
The continent of Africa also witnessed a consolidation of British colonial power during the 19th century. British immigration to the recently acquired Cape Colony began to increase in the 1820s, which pushed out thousands of Dutch-descended settlers, known as Boers, into the northern hinterland. Resentful of British rule, they established their own independent republics, namely the Transvaal and Orange Free State, but these two eventually succumbed to British occupation with the conclusion of the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1902. Meanwhile, in North Africa, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, which linked the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, proved of vital strategic importance for British trade routes. Although Britain could not take direct control of the canal, it was able to militarily occupy Egypt in 1882, but did not consider it to be formally within the empire. Further territorial expansion, in what became known as the Scramble for Africa in the late 19th century, saw Britain gain control of much of the eastern and southern parts of the continent. Efforts were also made to build a continental railway from the Cape to Cairo, although this was never completed.
Of course, because I wanted to say, was it completed? There's a there's a railway from East Africa to West Africa. I'm not sure. Of course, because my brain was trying to register that. What?
Of the continent. Efforts were also made to build a continental railway from the Cape to Cairo, although this was never completed.
Oh, from the Cape to Cairo. From South Africa to East Africa? Not Africa. Right? No, not here. So this is East Africa. Right? Yeah, East Africa.
As the 20th century dawned, Britain's position as the leader in world trade and adoption of the role of global policeman allowed it to also control the economies of nations who were not part of the British Empire, such as China, Argentina, and Siam. An electrical telegraph network, known as the All Red Line, was completed in 1902, which allowed Britain to communicate directly with all of its overseas colonies across the empire. As Britain's predominantly white colonies developed economically and socially, they sought to gain political independence from the mother country. Canada was formed into a confederation in 1867, and
Just imagine where they were. See them sitting pretty or sitting in their own cabal to say, yes, this is where we are, but we are controlling the entire world. Tiny, very tiny, 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 tiny. It's still, but my question still remains. Do you think if they wanted to expand to like own more land masses, and say, oh, the one they have or the landmass or the island they own is too small for them, they want more, do you think they wouldn't have? They would have. Because what do you mean? They had the power. They had the power. They had the power. They had a lot of the power. So far, so good. They could acquire what they wanted. They could get what they wanted to get. But still, they said, no, let's stay here. Enjoy the land that we have, the small land that we have. Let's manage it. Let's from here control the world. Let's own the world. We don't need all of those land masses to feel powerful. We are powerful. Kudos to you, Great Britain. Kudos to the British Empire.
granted the right of full self-governance.
Take it back.
They sought to gain political independence from the mother country. Canada was formed into a confederation in 1867 and granted the right of full self-governance, with the exception to international relations. Australia and New Zealand followed similar paths in 1900, becoming newly created dominions of the empire. Ireland also hoped to gain some form of independence from Britain during this time.
Ireland.
Multiple Home Rule bills were put before the British Parliament, but these were all defeated on the grounds that partial Irish independence would pose a threat to the unity of the empire. The threat to the empire, however, would ultimately come from Germany and the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. During
You
the conflict,
see?
Britain relied heavily on the empire for importing food, resources, and crucially, military support. Over 2.5 million men from Britain's dominions and colonies served in the First World War, with many from
2.5 million. 2.5 million. And you say what? Somebody commented. I'm still gonna refer to the comment somebody mentioned, or so somebody left because in a previous video. Great Britain. Have you noticed that it is the only nation that has great in it? And truthfully, before that comment, I haven't actually taken notes or actually noticed. But truthfully, isn't that mind blowing? A small island, 2.5 million. I mean, what year was this? And we're talking about like years. You need to know the real definition of small but mighty again. Look no further. Let the British Empire, Great Britain, let you know that, yeah, definition of small but mighty. Look for it in the dictionary. They are the one. You don't even have to go anywhere, go further to find it. It's Great Britain, the British Empire. That's the definition of small but mighty. I mean,
Canada, India, Australia,
and what? Go back a bit.
from Britain's dominions and colonies served in the First World War, with many from Canada, India, Australia, and New Zealand making the ultimate sacrifice for king and country.
This just reminds me of, I'm sorry I had to pause it again. I recently checked a video of the history of Canada and also talk about how Canada deployed some of their military men, army or something to fight, to help break the British Empire, to fight, to assist the British Empire to fight the war. Learn history. It gets why. It gets why. It gets why. You see how everything is intertwined? I mean, recently we're talking about the history of London, history of England, history of New York, how York came to be, then history of America, the British and the British American War, Great Britain. And I am looking at you like this. I'm like, you deserve your flowers. I don't think people give Great Britain the credit they deserve, enough credit. I don't think people give them credit enough. I don't think people do.
Britain was able to defeat Germany and its Ottoman allies in the war, and annexed much of their territory in the Middle East, Africa, and the Pacific. Victory, however,
Mark your
paid a heavy
territory.
price for Britain and signalled the beginning of the end for the empire. Although 1921 marked the peak of the British Empire's territorial possessions, Ireland was granted independence that same year, and soon other nations within the empire began to question when they may become independent also. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 put a temporary halt on this, as Britain once again turned to the empire for economic, material, and military support. Though ultimately victorious, Britain was bankrupted by the war and was no longer in a position to support its overstretched and questioning colonies.
They've done
Gradually,
enough.
throughout the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, the colonies and dominions of the empire were granted their independence from Britain. In what was recognised as the wind of change, almost
Wind
400
of
years
change.
of British colonial history came to an end. Although almost all these newly independent nations did not sever ties with Britain completely, and agreed to join the political association
Commonwealth
named
of
the Commonwealth,
Nations.
with 14 of these nations also retaining the British monarch as their respective head of state.
Wait,
Perhaps
let me see the nations. Let me see.
nations did not
Commonwealth. You see that? You see that? If we couldn't keep the British Empire, then let us have Commonwealth. If we couldn't hold or keep onto the British Empire, then let us hold on to something, have something. Commonwealth of Nations. And you say, wait, you say what again? If, see, that's why I said like community. You see, England and Scotland coming together, the fact that they came together to you as union, unified. I have this, you have this. Let's come together. Let's see. I think well, we've almost come to the conclusion of this video because my mic is telling me something otherwise. It's done. But yeah, I'm sorry for the breaking transition. Yeah, I think it's about time to get a new mic. So since let's say Scotland have their own, England have got their own, let's come together. Let's see what we can do with our power. Since they can't sustain or keep the British Empire going, let's form. Let's have the Commonwealth. Isn't that beautiful? Yes.
sever ties with Britain completely, and agreed to join the political association
Commonwealth
named the
of
Commonwealth,
Nations.
with 14 of these nations also retaining the British monarch as their
Let me see the nations: Jamaica, New Zealand, St. Vincent, okay, Australia, Canada, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis. Is Nigeria not part of it? Is Nigeria not part of the Commonwealth? I think Nigeria is part of it. Nigeria not part of the Commonwealth? Is it not? This is Belzy, right? The Bahamas.
respective head of state. Perhaps what many see as the final and most
I'm
symbolic
sorry, let me take it back a bit.
political association named the Commonwealth, with 14 of these nations also retaining the British monarch as their respective head of state. Perhaps what many see as the final and most symbolic representation of the end of the British Empire came in 1997, when Britain formally handed over Hong Kong to China. The legacy of the empire, however, remains with us to this day, as the English language is the most widely spoken on Earth, and British culture, practices and customs remain universally popular. Modern Britain itself can even be seen as a microcosm of the empire, with people of almost every race, nationality, religion and culture that were once under British rule, now living on the very island that began the journey of empire all those years ago.
Love this. I love this. What? This is almost how many minutes long video? No way. I'm so sorry. But yeah, this is enough information to go around, I think. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I think we've actually said enough in this video. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, if they just couldn't have the British Empire, then let us own something that we can sustain and keep, which so happen to be the Commonwealth of Nation. Love it, love it, love it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and all that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.